Alright, we're looking at the first jug here. This is what was collected out of the second container, the second condenser jug, 5-gallon can at the very bottom of the downhill slope of the first extended pipe. You can see here, if I rock that, it's got a nice oily look to it. It's a little more liquid than the first catch, a little thinner, but it's very, very black, very nice. And if we look at it right here on the side, you can see just about how much we got out of that. And let's see, that is about 1/4 gallon right there. So let's go ahead and go on to this one. Now this is the glass jug that we had been looking at the whole time. And as you can see, if I move that around, there's a nice black layer on the bottom and this really golden honey-colored oil floating around up above that. And you notice if that black stuff and the honey color weren't both oils, the black would be on top. Typical if that was water and oil. So that was how much we collected, minus a little bit of experimenting from there, obviously. And then this is from the first one. This is a very thick crude oil. You can tell because I can put it up on the edge of the glass there, pull it back. You can see a lot of it left over behind on the glass. Still a little bit of water in there that we're going to condense out of this now that we're going to put this through the refinery. So if you look at that jar, we ended up with not too bad, a little bit there. What is that jar? About a 1 quart, maybe a 1.5 quart jar, so I'm not sure. Maybe a 1/2 quart to a quart of really thick crude there out of that one. So if we made a total measurement here between the three, we probably ended up with just under 1/2 gallon of crude oil, minus also what I have here. So let me go ahead and pull these test tubes up one by one here and show you the consistency and the color up close. So you can see from the fourth and final collector here, it's a very thin colored, almost rusty looking liquid, very thin, very viscous, not much consistency to it. Let's go ahead and grab the second container here. You'll notice a really beautiful golden color to that fuel. It's about the last of where the oils really collect, a higher grade of oil. Alright, you can notice how thin it is. It doesn't stick up on the glass all that well. Let's go to the second catch here. This is where we start getting into a little bit darker crude. And you'll notice in there, if I move that around, it will actually color the glass but won't fully stay on it. That's a pretty good indicator to the quality of fuel you get there. Very liquid. Alright, and fourth and final one here. As you can tell, if I roll that onto the glass, say towards us here, it'll actually stay and coat the glass. As you can tell right there by the streak running down it. That's a very thick crude. You can tell when I try to roll it there, it doesn't roll like the rest. It's a very slow moving crude oil. So that's what we're collecting in the very first collector, and as you can tell, it'll sit up there on the glass. We got some evaporation bubbles in between it there, but I can show you from this side. Very dark crude oil. So the next step of this project now is to put this all through the refinery, which will actually be connected inside the wood stove that made all of this. So in the end, what we'll have is all the liquid being produced, the crude oil, will once again flow back through the wood stove, go through the refinery, out the refinery tower, and on the other side we'll have a high-grade fuel to use in any engine. I hope you enjoyed. Until next time, this was Mr. Teslonian and the Teslonian Man Show. Hi folks, Mr. Teslonian back here again. Now we're going to go through the results of the BIOCRUDE oil project, and I'm going to start from right to left here and tell you just what we're looking at and where it came from. Let me zoom in on this a bit here. That final little test tube there is from the fourth and final collector on the system, the plastic jug at the very end. That is the entirety of the liquid that was gathered in that jug, so there was no other liquid but that amount right there, which is a really good sign. So let me go ahead and zoom in on the second one here. This auburn looking one right here is from that glass jug that we were looking at during the processing. You can see a very clear, nice auburn color to that. Almost resembles a refined state of fuel already. We'll go in here one more. This is going to be much more difficult to see. It is a blacker crude. The difference between it and the first one is that this first one, which I'll show you here in a minute, this crude in the first one is so thick that it'll actually stick to the glass, whereas the crude in the second one won't stick to the glass. So we'll go ahead and show you that here in just a moment. You'll see some evaporation taking place in the sunlight here. That's both any water that might have been in there and possibly any gas fumes also that are in there. So let me go ahead and back out here. You can see these 3 jugs over on the right here. That is the full collection that we've gotten out of the system. And I'm going to go ahead and take the camera in a little closer and show you just how much we ended up with from that run and the 3 different grades. Because remember, the 4th grade, all we ended up with was that little amount right there in that test tube. So not a lot to work with. So give me just a moment. I'll take the camera in here and I'll show you all these grades up close and show you how much we produced. Hi there folks, Mr. Teslonian back here again. Really quickly, I set up a little spot. I've got some high winds going today. I've been trying to do this shot for the last few minutes. I can't keep the lighter lit to show you what's going on here. I want to show you the crude oil, the BIOCRUDE, actually burning and in action, so you can see that it's actually quite flammable. So give me just a moment here. I'm going to walk over there, scrape some up, light it on fire, and show you what it can do. Alright, so what we got here is we got one stick that I just set up in another shot. I may use that later on, so I'm not going to light that now. We're going to start from fresh. We've got some cardboard here. I'm going to go ahead and shred a little chunk of it up. This is a funnel. Well, here, we'll start with this. This is the jar that we had the amber looking crude inside of. That was that jar we were watching fill. I've dumped most of the lighter liquid out of there, and right now, if you look inside of there, there's this layer of a very golden oil that's very heavy, very sticky, that doesn't want to come out of there very easily. So I'm going to wipe this piece of cardboard around inside of there, and we're going to take a sample and see how well it burns. You can see it's actually a good oil when you put it in there. My hands are going to get very covered here trying to do this. Alright, so you can see here we've got a nice sample of that BIOCRUDE oil there, some on my fingers. If the winds will allow us here, let's see how it lights. So there you go, just a brief moment in the lighter and we've got ignited fuel. The wind is shifting on me a bit here, so it's going to be difficult to see the flames going to the opposite way all of a sudden. But it's an aggressive burn. You can see the black smoke from the oil burning off the top of that. Alright, so there's one good test, and it doesn't want to go out. There we go. Let me go ahead and take another piece of this cardboard. Here, we'll use a stick this time, just to show you it on a piece of wood. We'll take that jar once again. I'm going to get even oilier this time. Try to wipe it around in there and get some of that oil to cover that stick for a good sample here. So there you go. We basically were able to cover that entire stick with this BIOCRUDE that's inside of there. Let's see how well we can get it to light here. So there you go. Just a moment with the lighter and some wind cooperation to keep it going from the right direction. And there's your BIOCRUDE on fire. Highly flammable fluid. You can see it's raging right towards my fingers there. I'm going to have to let it go. Got me a little bit of a burn, but there you go. So that's your BIOCRUDE in action. It's highly flammable. Usable fuels. Once again, just another sample here. Since my hands are already covered, I'll take another piece of wood here and try to saturate it with some more of this oil. So as you can tell here, I'm just really trying to wipe that stick around in there, making a good mess of everything, trying to put a good coating so you can really see that this is quite a flammable oil. Hopefully it doesn't light all the way up to my fingers there, huh? No, it'll be alright. So here we go. Obviously that stick is heavily covered. Once again, if wind's permitted for us here, we're going to put that up. And there you go, you're already on fire. Highly flammable fluid, as you can tell. We had a little bit of a traveling cinder there for a second. So there you go, a lot of fuel energy. As you can tell, it's still traveling. Set that down, starting to get hot. Well, I hope that's a good example and demonstration. The winds are changing without the oxygen to the underside. Once again, I'll relight that for you. And it's basically used up all its fuel energy. So there's your BIOCRUDE in action, just to show you that it is obviously a very flammable substance. The crude that we were burning here is actually what came out of this container. If I hold that jar out, that's that amber colored, not even the darkest of it all. That was actually the dark crude that you saw on the bottom of the jar when I showed it to you in the earlier film, without the lighter stuff in there. So that's what that looked like, and without any real distillation or anything. It's obviously highly flammable fuel. I hope you enjoyed. Until next time, this is Mr. Teslonian and the Teslonian Man Show. Hi folks, Mr. Teslonian back here again. I want to take you through how to convert this BIOCRUDE oil I just showed you how to make in the prior films into a usable fuel. A quick demonstration of how this is going to work. We have a gasifying cook stove back here that's going to provide our heat. We have a test tube here, and in that test tube what I've done, and in the prior video, this is test tube number 1 with the thickest and the darkest of the crude we produced out of the very first collector in the system. And that's what we're running through first. So we're going to start in line and run each one of these and see which one produces the best fuels the easiest. So I have that right now inside of this test tube. It's going to run up through this condenser I showed you. I pulled the condenser off of the other project. It goes into the first collector, comes out and into a secondary collector, and out of the top of that again. That should give us some kind of indication of fuel production. So let me go ahead without any ado here and start this fire up in the gasifier and see if we can't get our production started. I'm going to have gloves on and start moving this gasifier out from underneath this quite a bit. I don't need that much flame. It'll be way more than I need, so I'm going to have to kind of be on this while we're doing this shot. Alright, so here we go. Fire's starting. Now, over on the other side there, what I can do is probably zoom in the camera as we get this cooking up a little bit and show you the actual fuel stilling out inside of those jars, in the collector jars. I just want to show you it starting up first. See if we can't move that back just a little bit. We don't need that much flame. I've got some good gloves on here, so I'll be able to mess with it a bit. Should have made a little handle on it. Might have been quite a bit easier. That's the next project maybe on the gasifying stove. Alright, so there we go. We got some flame going here. What we're going to do now is go ahead and I'm going to zoom in on those collectors and see if we can't show fuel being produced here. So give me just a second here to readjust this camera. Alright, there we go. Now there's a sticker right in front of that one. So it'll still give you some kind of indication there, kind of jumping around. You should be able to see exactly what's being produced in the system right there. So we're going to go ahead and let this run now. I'm going to have to adjust this flame quickly. It's gotten pretty big. Alright, so I'm going to let the film run. I'm going to talk a little bit through it here while I'm adjusting this flame. I've got quite a big flame, quite a big system I'm using here. I could have made a smaller gasifier for this. It's basically my Bunsen burner I'm using here. Alright, I can hear the crude starting to bubble in there just a little bit, so I'm going to back the flame off slightly. Now one of the things I have inside of that copper tube that I showed you, that was attached to the top end. Alright, now we've got smoke production here. You can start seeing the smoke being produced inside of that first condenser jug there. I may just take the camera down off of the tripod and put the camera right up to that so you can actually see production as it's happening here. I've got to be real careful with the heat I'm producing, so allow me to concentrate over just a little bit here. The second I start seeing condensed liquid forming in there, I'll move the camera over. We should be able to get at least 2 grades of fuel from this if everything works out correctly. Alright, it cooled down a bit, so I got to heat it back up. This is going to be a real tricky maneuver I'm working with here. Such a big flame. Okay, it's bubbling again. What I'm going to try to do here is slowly cook this and see if we can't produce things that are more like the butanes and others first at a low temperature. Cook those off and see if we can't produce some kind of liquid that's going to be the lightest and the easiest to boil off first. And we'll go through stages trying to figure out just how many different types of fuel we can get out of this. So right now we are still applying heat to this. These test tubes are pretty low grade that I have here. I'm kind of curious on how well they're going to work. Alright, you can see a little bit of smoke starting to build inside that jar down there. I haven't seen any liquid condensing yet, so I'm still curious on how long it's going to take for that. I don't want to break this test tube, so I'm trying to not overheat it, not destroy any of the fuels that I might produce or create. Try to go through step by step here. What's going on here? Possibly you can see that in the bottom of the jug. I can shake that around just a little bit, zoomed in about right there, just to show you the liquid we're producing. Let me back off the fire here from our test tube just a bit while I do this. Alright, so hopefully in the shot there you can actually see that nice golden fluid, rolled to the other side there, rolling around in that jar. That is our liquid that we're producing, our gasoline off of the BIOCRUDE fuel. Let me go ahead and zoom back out for you. Set that shot back straight across. You can see what's going on here. Alright, so it's taken us a few moments, and what I have to do to get this to work quite right, I've noticed, is I'm going to have to put a little bit of a levy or a wedge underneath that side. So give me just a moment here to put that underneath there, and you'll see from there that fuel starts flowing into that bottom receptacle there. There we go. What's going on is that I have a bit of a down tilt to my coil in there. So there we go, we're still heating that fuel system up. Let's see if we can drip some more fuel out of the condenser coil. I'm going to zoom in for you so you can see it come out. Camera there, okay, here we go. I think that'll be good enough for you to see if anything comes out right there. Here we go, I'm going to lift that condenser coil just a bit. Allow any fluid that's in there to fully make its way out. Okay, I didn't really see much more there. I'm going to set that back up. But we do definitely have fuel being produced within the system here. Alright, let me go ahead and throw a little bit more wood in the gasifying stove here, see if there's anything left inside that test tube. That should be about all the fuel we're going to make. I didn't even expect to make that much, to tell you the truth. We only filled the test tube to about here, if you can see that. Alright, so that's our last little batch of wood here. See if we can't get that to heat back up just for a brief moment. See if anything's left inside the system here. And what we're going to do is take that lid off of that main jar and try to light this fuel we just created out of our own BIOCRUDE oil made from wood. So alright, you can see the flames are starting to get bigger here. I can see quite a bit of condensation still inside of the tube. I'm curious on just how much is still not making it through the condenser here. It may be very heavy oils that are just too heavy to even make it that high past the catalyst of the copper. plus the brass and other metals here. Alright, so there we go. I can hear the crude inside of there starting to bubble again. I'm going to go ahead and superheat this, and if the test tube cracks while we're doing it, it was just a part of science here. I'm going to try to crack anything left inside of those carbons, you know, the long chain carbon samples that I'm looking for. Sorry, there I had to adjust this fire just a bit. Okay, so what we got here is the lighter of the two are alkanes and alkenes that we're going to try. Alright, so we got this flame roaring up here at the very end. Trying to see if there's anything left whatsoever inside of our system here of our BIOCRUDE conversion into gasoline. You can see the gasifying cook stove over here heating our test tube. There's still quite a bit of condensation showing up here inside of this test tube. I'm not sure what kind of fuels those are. I am going to test it here real quick as we stop the system in a moment. Once this ends and once I stop seeing condensation, I'll believe that most of my fuel has been produced. The only thing that should be left inside of this flask when I'm done is going to be basically coke ash, which is a heavy carbon ash. So that should be all that's left. And you can't really see inside of it at the moment, so I'm not sure how close to producing that coke ash I really am. So we're going to let that burn just a little bit longer here and see just how much more is going to be produced. Probably heard one of those squirrels in the background just now. Alright, I'm actually seeing in the second condenser jug now, I think I see some liquid finally building in there. Let me go over and shake that real quick and see if there is actually a liquid flow. Does appear to be some liquid. Very, very little. It's not much. I can see just a light coating gathering at the bottom there. So not really much there. That could be just a further distillation from the original process here. We've been burning now for a good 10 minutes or more. And I'm pretty sure that most of what was inside of this has been cracked off of there, even though I still see quite a bit of condensation built in the top of this test tube. That does make me curious on how much more fuel is really there. We're going to go ahead and end this process when the fire dies down a bit here and test out that fuel it just produced and see just how well it works. See whether or not we've refined it far enough to become a gasoline, or if it's actually a diesel in that first one. Still, it needs to be further refined. And the winds are going to kick up here and kind of blow that flame, so that's not going to be hitting our test tube. So I'm going to lift it up and try to finish this off at a really high temperature. See if we can't isolate the very last of anything in there. I can still hear it crackling and bubbling in there, so there's still something in there for energy. I can start seeing some steam building inside that jar over there. So there is some kind of moisture right now still transferring through the system. So I'll keep going here briefly. For the diehards, I left this part of the whole process in there for people that truly wanted to see how far I took this, just to show you what the fuel is on the other side. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and pull that down. I'm going to let the system cool a bit here. We're going to go over to that final jug. First of all, let's go ahead and lift this condenser once and just see if any extra fluid had been stuck inside of the coil there. Alright, well, I don't see much more. Alright, now that we've let the fire die down, I'm going to go ahead and remove the camera here. I wanted to show you something that I was talking about. We still got some nice red coals burning inside of there, you can see flashing. So I'm going to keep the camera out from over that. But I was going to tell you, you know, as I was saying throughout the shot, there's condensation or a moisture building still at the top of the test tube. And I'm not sure why it's building so thick and then running back down without ever leaving the system. I may have some restriction in here that I'm going to have to take a look at. But we did end up with some fuel out the other side here. So let's take a better look at this fuel. And you can see it. Let's see here. You see a little bit of it rocking around down in the very bottom down there. We're going to try to light this on fire real quickly here. Let's go ahead and set the camera down and see how well this lights on fire. Okay, so here we go. Alright, so what I've got here is I've got a lighter and a few sticks. I don't know, we got a couple pieces of wood and some sticks here. We got a lighter. Alright, so let's go ahead and see just how flammable, if at all, our fuel. Let me go ahead and give you a shot there if I can inside the jar, showing you there's some sediment in there. Then now that could have come out of the pipe. It actually has an oil appearance to it. I was just looking at it, kind of a darker color, still kind of amber colored on the fuel here. So we're going to take a longer stick, rub it around inside of that, try to get it covered, and see if this will burn at all. So here we go. There we go. Wow, look at that. It burned immediately and is almost gone. So there you go. That was the flash burn of our fuel. If it burned that fast, I'm actually expecting this to evaporate very quickly. Let's try that again. Alright, you can see the moisture all over the stick here. We can get the lighter to light. There we go. And it's burned off. Okay, so I don't want the stick to burn here. Let's try that again. This seems to be a pretty good grade of fuel. It doesn't have a lot of length to its burn, but it's got a good flash, which means it's probably more of a gasoline. Look at that. Isn't that amazing? So, there you go. That's how to refine from wood all the way to gasoline, or some form of high-grade fuel here. I'm going to keep playing around with this just for a moment, just to show you. Hopefully this will continue to burn the whole way. Yeah, look at that. That's just great. Look how fast it burns away, though. That's really impressive. Leaves almost no residue behind as it's doing so. It's almost burning more as an alcohol than it is of a gasoline. I'm going to have to try this next to normal gasoline and see what the difference is going to be. It's got a little bit of an oil smoke to it when it burns. Pretty neat. I'm going to save this little bit now, and I'm going to try to do a couple more experiments with it just to see exactly what it is. Our next process, let me go ahead and put this back together so it doesn't evaporate all out of there. Alright, now did we get any fuel inside the second jar? Hold on, before I go on. I don't really... Let's see if we got any light whatsoever. It's a curious fuel. It drew the flame in for a moment instead of blowing the flame out. So I'm pretty sure alcohol and gasoline burn differently, and I'm going to have to look up again which one burns which direction. That'll give me a pretty good idea. That actually pulled the flame inwards instead of blowing the flame outwards. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed how to make gasoline or some form of fuel to run an engine off of wood from the beginning by turning it into BIOCRUDE oil, then distilling it like we have here today and turning it into gasoline. Our next project is going to be taking this grade right here, this honey oil, and now running this through the system and seeing what kind of fuel we can turn this into. Well, I hope you enjoyed. Until next time, this is Mr. Teslonian and the Teslonian Man Show. Hi folks, Mr. Teslonian back here again. Today I'm going to fire up the BIOCRUDE producing wood stove here, run the generator, produce gasoline. We're going to power up that propane powered refrigerator there on the left also at the same time. Let me go ahead and take you through some of this from the start here at the generator. So what we have here, once again, is we have our valve we have our synthetic gas line running into just a black iron T into a valve here into where the carburetor used to go on the old generator here. We don't have any fuel lines hooked up to the system. It's all empty. That tank is fully drained. As you can tell, if I look inside of there, it's rusty on the bottom. This hasn't had liquid in it in a very long time. So there you go. That's how it's mounted to the generator. That's what will be running there. It comes out of there, runs up into our wood wine collector. This is actually using the catalyst effect of synthetic gas against copper. I had to go ahead and take this copper and burn it and then put it in some water and some earth and add a little electricity to it to create a really heavy green corrosion all the way across and inside and outside this copper. It's actually the green corrosion here, the copper oxides, that we're going to want to really make the catalyst effect a lot stronger. So this will catch our wood wine, which we'll use later in another video to produce methanol. So it comes up out of there into our first major condenser here. Goes through another section of copper tubing. Now you got to make sure the copper is running at a downhill, otherwise the wood wine will be produced the second the synthetic gas hits it and will roll backwards. It won't want to go through it unless it's on a downhill slope. So once again, we're through the fractional distillation center here into our second catch there. In the background you see our very first catch. That's the heaviest of the BIOCRUDEs, which we'll be running today. You can see a little pull-off spot there at the bottom. Here's our BIOCRUDE feed into our thermal cracking unit inside of the wood stove. If I show you that inside of there, you can see it running through. Alright, so here we are looking inside the wood stove just after ignition here. It's starting to fire up. It's starting to heat up our BIOCRUDE thermal cracking unit and our BIOCRUDE reactor up top production system. Here's the jar of the BIOCRUDE that we're going to be putting through the system. If you can see down there's a liquidy portion. And at the very bottom, there's a very heavy, thick sludge. We're going to go ahead and throw both of these through the system combined. Both have the bottom stuff is more of a paraffin, extremely long chain carbons. So we have to throw those through and break those probably twice, which is the bottom part of our catalyst separation system. Now this liquidy portion here that you see, that will actually probably give us the most of our gasoline production today. We're not going to run a lot through. Just enough to try to use up some of that catalyst metals I have in there. And I'm going to show you the gasoline that we produce at the end. So let's go ahead and just let this stove fully get up to temperature here. One of the things you're going to want to do is all the way down the line here, you're going to want to leave this valve open. That way the synthetic gas from the production can in there can actually go out until it's a good lightable gas. You'll be able to check this with your lighter, come in, hit it, and once it lights really easily, go ahead and then start up your generator. So give me a moment, let the stove warm up, and I'll show you the whole system in action. Okay, our fire is beginning to die down inside the wood stove, and you'll notice here that it's starting to clear up. You can actually see down into the jar. You'll see the condensated fuel down the edges of the jar here, still precipitating down the side. We're going to go ahead and take a second and let that fully cool, and I'm going to open up the jar for you and show you the fuel we've created. Alright, here we are at the end of our project. Let's take a look inside the stove. You can see in there just the very last of our flames are rolling. You can keep this going longer than this and produce more fuels. We've ran this now for 2 full stove loads to completely isolate all the BIOCRUDE I put through the system. Let's go ahead now and see if we've produced any fuel inside of our condensation jar here, our condenser. This is a little difficult to get out from underneath here. Okay. Next step here, let's slide that out of the way. And let's remove our jar. Alright, and you can see there what's inside the jar is this piece of pipe here. Now it smells like fuel, that's a good sign. So let's take something here, a piece of stick. Well, first of all, let me show you what it looks like inside of there. Hopefully you can see there. Now some of the black you see in the bottom was just some leftover BIOCRUDE in the jar that's now been stripped off the sides by the fuel condensing. You'll see a couple layers of fuel inside of there. One a little bit darker than the other, one floating on top of the other, and then a third one at the very bottom. The middle layer that you're seeing in there is diesel. The top layer I'm presuming is the gasoline layer, since it burns the best here. So let me go ahead and show you what we've got going on in here. We'll grab a stick here. Hopefully you can see this. Let's get some of that on there. I've got a lighter sitting here. Let's see if it lights. Let's keep that away from the jar, obviously, just to be safe. Maybe you can see this. Here we go. Oh, wow, look at that. Now that's a high grade of fuel. Let's see how long it burns. Well, it disappears very, very fast. So I'm presuming we're achieving a very high octane level, excuse me. This is obviously going to be very usable for combustion engine. Oh yeah, look at that. Hopefully you can see that. The wind's blowing it. It's got a bit of sooting coming off of it, so it still could be refined quite a bit. You notice how quickly that burns? It doesn't even light the piece of wood on fire. Let's do one more test. There we go. So there you go. There's how to thermally crack BIOCRUDE oil into a usable form of fuel using a liquid catalyst and a dry powdered catalyst system. Obviously a very high octane fuel, something you can use in any combustion engine. There's also diesel in the bottom of this, and that's something I'm going to have to find a way to extract out of this and show you how. In the plant we've been able to do this in a multi-stage distillation system that reruns it back through new catalysts and a catalyst recharge system that bakes the coke ash off of our catalyst inside of the system, which produces a lot more fuel. I don't have much longer than I can probably use those liquid catalysts inside of there, or molten catalysts, and without scrubbing the coke ash, which is a high carbon deposit left over when you're thermal cracking with a catalyst material. Let me go ahead one last time here, light some of this up. There you go. There's our biogasoline. Hope you enjoyed. Until next time, this is Mr. Teslonian and the Teslonian Man Show.